Happy day, everyone. It's that Friday again. Here we are at the wonderful podcast that we do bi-weekly called Empowered Through Health. Why? Because you are the best healthcare provider for your own health. And the whole idea around this beautiful show is to empower you with great information with all different speakers that specialize in different areas of human physiology around the world. Some of you already know my name is Dianne Solano. I'm an orthomolecular nutritionist. Yes, try saying that 10 times. It doesn't roll off your tongue very easily, but again, it's science-driven nutrition. I've been in the field for 20 years, and I'm just so passionate about getting people the right tools, delivering information for them to be able to take their health to the next level. And again, through my 20 years of practice, I've come across so many wonderful minds, so many niche practitioners and niche coaches that can really take your body physiology to the next level. And the whole idea here is to share information because information is power for you to take whatever you hear and move it forward powerfully for you and your family. And that's what I love about this bi-weekly show that we're doing twice a month, is to deliver that kind of information that typically you can't find so easily anymore. So today's guest is our wonderful cognition coach. Joshua Campbe, to me, is doing such a fabulous job at helping people perform at their maximum genetic potential using, yes, the number one thing we all have, which is our brains. And the brain really is the center of information. If that brain is not working optimally, forget it. It's not going to be taking you to the life you really want to create for yourself. And that's essentially what this podcast is about, is to give you the tools to be able to take your life to the next level. Before we start our show, as usual, I like to always get clear that this information is not medical advice. We're not here to give you medical opinions of any sort. That's between you and your healthcare provider. This is a platform for sharing. It's a platform to open up the possibilities for you to make decisions and go explore more on your own rate, your own pleasure, and your own standards. So today I want to, with no further ado, introduce our wonderful guest, Mr. Joshua Campbe, who, again, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, is our cognition coach. He has coached many individuals from brain injury to everyday busy moms to children to athletes on how to perform better with their brain. And what today's topic is going to be around is specific to foods, food and brain fuel. Food, because food feeds your 100 trillion cells, and your brain is the most energy dependent, most nutrient dependent, most toxin vulnerable system of the body. So today's conversation is really about, what should I eat? How do I eat it? What should I avoid? What other things do I not maybe know about that could be impeding on my brain performance and overall cognition performance? So with no further ado, Joshua Campbe, please share with us today, your expertise and what you've seen in the field, having trained and coached many, many, many walks of life around the world with their brain function. And again, please enlighten us, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation around this today.
Well, first off, thanks for the wonderful introduction, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here again with you. And I think you nailed it on the head. It all starts in the mind. It all starts in the brain. And you have those things that you need to be mindful of. It's the most energy dependent. It's the most nutrient dependent, but it's also the most stress vulnerable and toxin vulnerable. So if we look at those four things as how can we increase how much the good stuff and decrease the bad stuff, you're really going to start to be covering all bases. So what I like, especially whether it's you're training, whether you're working full time, whether you're a kid that's growing, everybody's body has a few different needs, but we know some things remain the same. The brain's mostly fat for all of us across the board. So that segues into one of the first things that we want to get is some good oil, some good fat. So why? Because that's what the brain is mostly made up of. So it would make good sense to have some of those. So I know if you do most people sometimes come and say, well, should I be taking omega-3s or omega-6s or which nuts or which seeds? You'd want to be having a range of all of them. We know that a lot of people don't eat a lot of seafood, which is why it's very common. And I'm sure you've heard it before that a lot of people are supplementing with omega-3s to get those DHAs and EPAs because they don't get them in their diet naturally. But you could eat some more cold water fish to get some of those things. But if we go back to those four buckets, and why not? Let's start with there's energy. Your brain is typically always on. It doesn't go to sleep when we're asleep. In fact, some of the activity steps up when we're asleep. But in order to produce all that energy, it's all those mitochondria that are running, and those need the micronutrients or sometimes the vitamins. So if you're not getting your full complement of vitamins, you want to be having some of those things. But most of the times that can come in the form of water. And why do I say water is that if anybody's like me, you probably grew up drinking tap water at first. And they put so many things in there. And I swam. So can you imagine swimming in a pool, your body's soaking up all these chlorine-filled water, and then you go home and you're drinking tap water? It was a recipe for, let's just not say not optimal performance. So if you want to clean up your water, because that's what you're drinking most of the time, is get a good quality filtered water, and you don't have to go out and do anything too crazy. I get my water filtered through a reverse osmosis machine and add some trace minerals to it. So I'm providing the body with some of those minerals it needs in order to give all of that energy. I'm sure you've seen some of that in your experience, Dianne, that when people change their water intake, they just see massive changes.
Absolutely, because water right now, we don't talk about it enough, I don't think. But truly, water is that delivery system that makes our whole biochemistry function properly. You can go a month without food. You can't go more than 24 hours without water. Like, the body literally starts to deteriorate right in front of your eyes, and it is life-threatening to be without fluids. Fluids drive biochemistries, the H2O molecules that break down. But I love a reference what one of our leading mentors, functional medicine doctor, Dr. Bob Rakowski, often talks about. He says, if you don't have a filtration system, you are the filtration system. Like, there's too many times I see people saying, you know what, I'm just not going to bother buying better quality water. And regardless of what you choose, reverse osmosis, I don't know, ozone, there's just so many beautiful filters out there. And maybe we should do a show on that alone. But really, it's about having clean water because you want to remove the toxicity bucket. All of us are already so toxic from the air that we breathe, the chemicals we're exposed to. That's just the way the world is going right now, unfortunately. So we got to be mindful about not adding more of that toxicity bucket, which affects our brains. Because as I know you'll talk about, which we had a discussion earlier around this topic, is the connection between, yes, your mitochondria. Your mitochondria, by the way, is your energy center of your cells. It's what produces energy, something called ATP. If any of you had taken any science courses in your high school years, you probably remember the powerhouse cell mitochondria, ATP production. But essentially, that really is your energy drivers, and that is really important to take care of. But what affects mitochondria is toxic levels. And again, we are exposed to it. If we're introducing it with our water because we are becoming the filtration system instead of spending the extra $1, $2, $3, whatever to a better system, you're flooding your body with more toxins, which at the end of the day affect your brain chemistry as well. So yes, Josh, thank you for bringing that to light about the quality of water, because your brain desperately needs that water. In fact, people feel off when they don't have enough fluid intake throughout the day.
Absolutely. And if we think of the brain as a muscle, just like in any other sport, when you use it through repetition, and we're using it 24/7, they can get inflamed. And you want that because that's how the muscles repair. So if we're thinking of the brain like that, it can get inflamed, but we don't want that inflammation to get too much, because then we're not in a good position either. So with the brain, is anything that can decrease some of that inflammation is generally going to lend it to better performance. So you have a range of things, some of those being plant compounds like your flavonoids and things like that in your berries, so in your blueberries, in your raspberries, all of those colorful foods. I don't know if you've ever heard the saying "eat the rainbow," and that's the reason, because all those compounds are there in those plants. But it's the same thing, anything else, and we can get into superfoods, because you have some superfoods and you have some medicinal mushrooms that are anti-inflammatory in their nature, and so they help to decrease that inflammation throughout the body, the brain being one of those areas. And so I just absolutely love that. But then when we look at the connection between the gut and the brain, and I know that's talked about way more in literature today, is a happy gut can lend itself to a happy brain. And the gut eats a lot of fibrous food. So if you're taking notes, you want to get some greens in there, you want to get different colors of food. change them up from day to day because they have those plant compounds that are very beneficial for you. But if you're like me and you're like, well, how can I go about and include all of these all the time? You get into almost like a building block, like when you're building Legos, it's one, then the other, then the other. I like smoothies because you can put everything in a blender, blend it up, and I can take it on the go. And I can know that, hey, I've added this, 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 and this, or especially if you have picky eaters. But it's all about getting that nutrition into the body in green leafy vegetables, berries, things that have good oil. So your nuts, seeds, your seafood. I wouldn't necessarily put a piece of salmon into the blender. Probably stay away from that. But you can take other nuts and seeds and medicinal mushrooms that have those things and incorporate them so you're getting multiple doses per day because it's so nutrient dependent and your brain's always working. Right now, you may be listening and driving somewhere, or you may be cooking, or you may be making notes. And all of those is taken from a cognitive perspective. It's taking cognitive load. So it's as if you're in your house and you've plugged everything into the same receptacle. After a certain point, the receptacle says, hey, you got to take something out. And that's your brain when it doesn't get any nutrition. It says, hey, you got to give us something because it's trying to keep up with your day to day. And it can if it's fueled.
Love it. And you know what? So let's recap. I mean, we're talking about healthy fats because we know the brain loves its fats. So we're looking at healthy oils like omega-3s, omega-6, omega-9. I mean, that is your discussion you need to have with someone that's going to direct you in the right direction. I just love omega-3s. I don't think we get enough of them. And they do come in the format of EPA, DHA, and that just helps down with the digestion part of it all. So if you're on this call and you're listening going, okay, I'm eating enough salmon, that's great. But truly that omega-3 is very temperature sensitive. So the minute you start cooking food, that quality starts to go down over time. That's why, more of the raw fishes. But again, not everybody likes it. And then you're dealing with a whole side of quality raw fish. So truly omega-3s will deliver that for you. And by the way, if you burp the omega-3 oil, you should be looking at digestive power or freeze them. That's one little hack I learned for a lot of my aging clientele. If they froze and took their omega-3s, it breaks down further down the digestive tract. So it's a lot easier for digestion. And then when you talked about the superfoods, we talked about the colorful rainbow, the different berries, the different vegetables, the quality water. We'll get into the medicinal mushrooms because there's a lot of great medicinal mushrooms right now that are really pushing the envelope with brain function, things like lion's mane, things like reishi, which we'll talk about. But one thing I really want to bring to light, Josh, before we go there is, we talked about gut health in the brain. The brain is the second gut that really is. They call the gut the second brain. And I also think it's important to talk about what to eliminate from the diet, because often we talk about what we should be eating, but things that we should avoid, even if it's just for a week. Because like I always say, bodies don't lie, they're really honest. So I'm a big fan of saying, guys, give up dairy, give up gluten, give up wheat for 1 week, give up processed foods for 1 week. Just eat whole foods. What are whole foods? Foods that Josh just named. They don't have labels to them. There's no processing to them. And let your body tell you how amazing it feels, because you're going to feel it in your mental capacity. Like you said, Josh, it's like having too many outlets plugged into a wall. You're going to fry it. You're going to jump, that breaker in your house. Same thing with the brain, but it has a better capacity to be sharper, less mental fatigue. If you start cleaning out the diet, getting those bowels to move, and thank you for touching on that with the fibrous foods, that helps move along the toxins outside of your body. You start moving better bowel function, means less toxicity. You're going to feel overall fantastic. So thank you for sharing that, Josh. I know sometimes with these calls, we share so much information that people are trying to capture it all. But one thing I really want to bring to light, I know that you actually sent me some samples of the new cognition sports drink that you will be featuring for your clientele. And I know it hasn't gone public yet, but I'm super excited because I see a lot of garbagey kind of sport drinks, a lot of chemicals in them. But the one you showed me that I had the privilege of trying in advance tastes amazing. It's sweetened with something called stevia, which is a very natural sweetener. And it has a whole bunch of beautiful health products in there. It's really clean, really healthy, and it has something called lion's mane and reishi. So why don't we segue there and talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So as a cognitive coach, I'm always looking for things that can increase your focus and attention, because those are some of the biggest mental muscles, because ultimately when you're more focused and more attentive, you pay attention to more things, right? But when you look at energy drinks, a lot of them have a lot of added sugar. They're not necessarily helping you. That added sugar is oftentimes heavily refined and heavily processed. You're not feeding the bacteria that you want to be thriving in the body. And so people get a spike, and then myself come down hard, and and I fall harder than the rise, almost like crash and burn term. But this energy drink is a lot cleaner. I had it myself and I just felt focused. I didn't have a lull at all. I slept like a baby. There's L-theanine in there, which is often found in green teas, and that helps to promote alpha brainwaves to give you that sense of calm in that GABAergic mechanism. So L-theanine can help you stay calm. There's B12 vitamins in there, and that helps with the neurotransmitters signaling. And it's one thing to have, I know Dr. Bob says that if you have stuff that are working but they're not functioning optimally, then you're going to have a mismatch. So the neurotransmitters is how all the brain cells communicate with each other. So what's going on the left side, what's going on the right side, they almost do that neural handshake. And so it's there. You do have a little bit of caffeine because that helps to keep you focused and alert. But oh my goodness, when you look at the medicinal mushrooms, that's where I was blown away, because I love my reishi, I love my lion's mane, but typically they're in two separate forms. And sometimes the more things you give somebody, the more confusion, and I forget to take them sometimes. So it was really nice to have them as a high quality, highly bioavailable in that drink that, again, you mentioned sweetened with stevia, which is a lot better than some of the other sweeteners out there. But in my cognitive scores, when I sat down to do that testing, it's a 6-minute assessment, I was blown away because I had some of the highest scores that I've ever had. And so I said, okay, what if day to day I could have more focus and more attention? And you have the medicinal mushrooms there that help to support the body, help to support the brain function while helping to promote detox. So again, because the brain's most energy-dependent, nutrient-dependent, you're providing some of that nutrition in those superfoods, but then you're also helping it detox and get rid of some of that toxin bucket that is building up just from it being working. So I'm super excited about that, because the reviews that I've heard so far is everybody loves it, but they've also felt sharper. They've seen the differences in their own life, and that's what it's about. It's when somebody has something and they say, hold on, something was different. Something changed. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I know for a fact something was different. And then they don't have it, and then they're like, it's off. It doesn't feel the same. And so everybody's so unique. So I'd love to say that, hey, this is going to do this, this, and this, but I don't know what it's going to do for you. But I'm super excited to find out, because I've heard all of the rave reviews, all of the testimonials, they just keep on pouring in.
You know what, Josh, I love the fact that you use measurables. It's not just this theory, okay, this is good for you, try it. You actually have tools, you have software that anyone around the world can access through a portal, and in 6 minutes, not only train their brain, but give them feedback on the foods that they're eating and how it's enhancing their performance on the spot. And that to me was really impressive, because, the brain is so quick, so fast that, those neurotransmitters work at lightning speed. Yet, your cognition program, literally, guys, it's like 6 minutes a day. You do a brain workout. It's all trackable. It's based on artificial intelligence. It measures your performance, and it increases your growth status based on how you perform. And that's what I loved about it. It wasn't just this, one box fits all. It's very, very bio-unique, and it caters to the individual. But what I love, Josh, was the fact that you've noticed, your clients and yourself, that when you eat this specific food, when you miss a meal, if you're heavily stressed, if you're underslept, the brain doesn't perform the next day. And in 6 minutes, you can see and track that data. Maybe you can share a little bit about that. Like I said, then I'll go into a little bit of the L-theanine and the medicinal mushroom part of it all, because that stuff is very fascinating.
Well, of course. And I'd love to. When you look at, there are a lot of tools out there, but this one, why I like this one the most is that it's 6 minutes. So it fits into that busy schedule, and it's all on the laptop. So you can take it with you wherever you are. But it's an adaptive program that challenges you based on where you're at. So it's absolutely adaptive. But what we've seen is that over the 300 plus people and more than that growing worldwide that have been using it is that they're able to see what stage they are on that given day. So you talked about stress. So if somebody is super stressed, typically they're not as focused, and you see that reflect in their numbers. They're not able to hit their previous best. And when you ask them, hey, what's going on? You get to see that, okay, when they're stressed, they fall off. When they're not sleeping, they fall off. When they haven't eaten well, they fall off. Or if they're eating but not eating healthy foods, they fall off. Or if their hydration zone, they fall off. There was one day that I was in the middle of a session and I said to myself, my lips feel a little dry. And at the end of the session, it was one of the lowest scores I've ever had. Now, your lips feeling dry could be because you're in a hot room, but it's often that your body's telling you, hey, can we get some water?
Yeah.
And so something as small as that, which is so subtle. And I wasn't getting up saying, oh, let me go drink some water, but I had the score right in front of me and it was day and night and said something was off. So I decided to go and get some water, drank some water, went and did another session. And in the span of 2 minutes, me drinking the water and doing another session, you could see the jump in score. Now, if anything, I'd have expected it to go down because it's like doing multiple reps. You do 1 rep and then you do 2, and eventually the muscle gets exhausted. But it wasn't that I was mentally exhausted, but I was dehydrated. And as soon as I introduced that into the body, it just like a sponge, it said, oh my gosh, thank you so much for waiting for this. And it took it all up. And then it was able to function a lot better. So that to me just underscores the importance of good food, hydration, and nutrition overall, because the same thing happens. And if you're like, hey, I want to test this out, there are demos. And I'd implore you, do it when you have had a good meal. The next day, have a sugar cube 2 minutes before. Do it and see, because it's day and night.
Love it. Love it. Feedback. The body's really honest. It never lies. It is so honest on its feedback. And that's what I love about this wonderful vehicle that we have, because when you don't have health, you don't have anything. If you don't feel good, you're not going to be able to perform in life. If you have no energy, if you're winded, you're tired, it really impacts the quality of life you're meant to live, whether you're going to be a powerful parent, a CEO that travels the world and breaks and makes deals, a carpenter, a cleaner, whatever your heart's desire is, you'll fulfill it if you feel good in your body. And too many times, Josh, I've seen people not feel well. Brain injury is one of them. As many of you may or may not know, I used to work at the Hyperbaric Oxygen Therapy Center. Brain injury was my thing. I saw it all the time. And I started to realize we really need to take care of our body and be careful with all these activities as well, wearing helmets, wearing seatbelts. Guys, once this starts to not work well, talk to someone who's had a level of brain injury. They would give anything to have mental focus back, cognition, balance back. So what we want to do is we want to say, hey, there is so much data out there that's supporting that brains really need nutrition. And the truth is that we have so many tools to access to help reduce that pain and inflammation. We see that with concussion. We'll probably do another segment specific to concussion again. I did one with Dr. Jared Singler about all that strategy, but the food and the diet is the same. Even with concussion injury, brain injury, mental focus, athleticism, remove the dairy, remove the gluten, bring in the healthy fats, the fish oils specifically. There's also a lot of great plant fats like avocado and coconut oil. Like, these are wonderful things you can dive into. Nuts and seeds, like Josh mentioned, all your plant compounds. And last but not least, good quality water and the superfoods. I mean, let's touch a little bit about that over the next 5 minutes before we have to end the show. But I'll give a little bit opening. Medicinal mushrooms have been on the earth for thousands of years. They actually existed before our human being footprint actually existed on the earth. They're known as Mother Nature's intelligence, and they are more stronger than your average vitamins and minerals made in a lab because they're actually produced by nature, but they're known as superfoods. So what's the difference? I tell people it's like software upgrade to the body. Most of us have cell phones. Most of us have an iPhone. If we don't really upgrade these phones in the middle of the night for the new software, they are going to be glitchy. They don't work well. It doesn't matter how expensive your phone is. Doesn't matter how great of hardware you bought. If the software can't communicate, it doesn't work optimally. Medicinal mushrooms help with that software upgrade to your body. So that's why I insisted in my practice, and up until today, One of the many strategies we use for people always includes some level of medicinal mushrooms. And there's ones that are specific for brain health. One is called lion's mane, and the other one is called reishi. And those two are having significant feedback on people really loving the quality of the mushroom. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, Josh, what to look for in a quality medicinal mushroom, because that's another question. People just don't know what they don't know. And the different delivery systems to get something like this in the body, because let's just face it, if it's not easy, if it's not convenient, if it's not price effective, if it doesn't taste good, people are not consistent, which is why I love to always showcase health hacks that anybody can implement today, tomorrow, and be consistent with it to start feeling the effects right away.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. If it's not easy, if it's not simple, people don't do it long term. And so to answer your first question, what to look for when you're looking at some of these medicinal mushrooms is quality. In my mind, you want to know what you're having. And a lot of that, unfortunately, can't be told at a glance. Because if you see 2 capsules or 2 pens, you know that this pen is blue and this one's black. But what if I grind it up and put it in a powder and put it in a capsule? You really have no idea to tell which was which. And unfortunately, there are some that are on the market that are just ground up. They're grown in plastic bags because these mushrooms are so intelligent that they seek to grow irrespective of environment. You do have some companies, one I like in particular, that grows its mushrooms naturally on a log as they were grown in their native origin. And as a result, they produce something called spores. And what spores are the replicating part of the mushroom. Now, maybe ask the company that you've looked at if they produce spores, and here's why. If it wasn't grown naturally, chances are they don't produce spores. Spores are like pollen to a flower. And if you've ever gone into like a plant store, fake plants don't produce spores. They just don't. They look very pretty, but they don't. The plants that are grown in the soil do. So quality is one thing I definitely look at. The next is bioavailability. That means how much of it can your body actually take up? So how much is available for the body? It's like going into a place and then being told, if you ever had a kid, don't touch anything. And they're like, what are you talking about? If your mushroom is low in bioavailability like that, your body's going to be like, what's going on? You have all this good stuff, but I can't access it. And the access is really crucial. And then what I like is the taste. There are some, when you get medicinal mushrooms, when you boil them down, typically that's how they're taken. You boil them down to a tea, and if you can do that, tip my hat to you, because it doesn't taste the best. People typically do that when they know that they have to, but they don't do it as a want to. Very big difference there. So what I like is that when you can layer it and infuse it into other processes. So I take mine in a coffee, a tea, a shake, in the new energy drink that's going to be coming out. Because why is it tastes great, it's cost effective, it's highly bioavailable, it has a certification, so it checks quality for me, and then it's cost effective.
Love it, Josh.
I absolutely, because here's the thing, it's not making things that only 1% of people can get. It's how can we make them available for everyone? So it has to be affordable, especially growing up in Jamaica. That hits home true for me because the dollar is just very different, but it's just super, super convenient.
And, that's how you're being able to service the world. So, if you want to have access to these wonderful products, you want some good suggestions from Josh on quality omega-3, quality plant nutrients, quality L-theanine, quality medicinal mushrooms that come in beverages and capsules, and even hot chocolate for kids. Like, I love what you're able to offer the world for pennies a day, Josh. So feel free to reach out to Josh Campbell. Where can people find you on Instagram? What's your handle?
On Instagram, it's YardieJosh, so YardieJosh.
That's a great way to find Josh. And therefore, you can find out a little bit more and ask him all the questions you want. And feel free to join us every other Friday as we have different practitioners from around the world sharing some wonderful health tips, advice, strategies that you can implement in your life, your loved one's life, and pass the baton forward. Because here's the bottom line. If you don't feel good in your body, you're never going to perform the same way. The body is so intelligent. We have 100 trillion cells. If we just know how to take care of this, you become a better version of you. And that's the whole purpose behind the show. So feel free to join me every other Friday at 4 o'clock Eastern Standard. You can follow me as well on Instagram, the Dianne Solano. We have our podcast highlights and everything else, and our future guests around the the world that we feature. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you in 2 weeks from now. Take care and be the best version of you. Thank you, Josh, for joining us.
Views expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and do not necessarily reflect the views of the station, its management, or advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.